The noble man dies first. The clever man inherits the crown. This world is not built for the pure. It's built for the prepared. If you think playing fair protects you, understand this. While you wait to be chosen, others are pulling the strings. Manipulation is not evil. It is essential. Every empire was built on strategy, not sentiment. And if you want to rule your life, you must master the tools of power. In this video, I will teach you how to play the game, coldly, cleanly, and without apology. Subscribe to our channel if you're ready to master your mind, and tell us, where are you watching from? Let me tell you a truth that the weak-minded will never accept. Power is not a gift. It is not bestowed by the generous or granted by the kind. Power, in its purest form, exists only in the hands of those brave enough or ruthless enough to seize it. I have watched princes rise and fall. I have seen republics crumble and empires emerge from their ashes. And in every instance, there was one undeniable constant. Those who waited to be chosen were inevitably crushed by those who chose to act. You see, most people live in a fantasy. They believe that if they work diligently, if they prove their worth, if they demonstrate their loyalty, power will naturally flow to them. This is the greatest lie ever told. The lie that keeps the masses docile, that maintains the hierarchy, that ensures the bold remain in control, while the meek wait. For their turn, that will never come. Here's what you must understand. Every moment of hesitation is a moment someone else is planning your downfall. While you wait for permission, others are writing the rules. While you seek approval, others are building armies. While you hope to be noticed, others are already moving the pieces that will determine your fate. Think of Caesar crossing the Rubicon. He did not ask the Senate's permission. He did not wait for the right time. He saw his moment and seized it with both hands. Was it legal? No. Was it proper? Never. But it was necessary. And in that necessity lay the seeds of empire. The first principle of power is timing. The second is audacity. And the third, the one that separates the rulers from the ruled, is the willingness to act while others deliberate. In every organization, in every social circle, in every human endeavor, there are moments when power hangs in the balance. These moments are brief, often invisible to the untrained eye, but to those who understand the nature of power, these moments shine like beacons in the dark. You must train yourself to see these moments. More importantly, you must train yourself to act on them without hesitation. When others step back, you step forward. When others question, you decide. When others debate the morality of action, you will have already changed the landscape of what's possible. Consider this. Every person who holds power today took it from someone else. Every corporation that dominates its market seized that position from a predecessor. Every leader who shapes the world stepped into spaces others were too afraid to claim. This is not a coincidence. It is the fundamental law of power dynamics. But remember, the seizure of power must appear natural, inevitable. Your rise should seem like the logical conclusion to a story everyone else is reading, but that you alone are writing. This requires patience, yes, but not passivity. It demands calculation, but never hesitation. The time to act is not when you are ready. The time to act is when the opportunity presents itself. Readiness is a myth invented by the fearful to justify their inaction. The truly powerful understand that you become ready by acting, not by waiting to act. Look around you, in your workplace, in your relationships, in every sphere of your life. Where are you waiting for permission? Where are you hoping to be chosen? These are the chains you have placed upon yourself, and until you break them, you will remain exactly where others want you to be. The truth that history teaches us, that every powerful figure has understood, is simple. If you want power, you must be willing to take it. Not someday, not when it's offered, not when you feel worthy. Now, today, in this moment. Because if you don't, someone else will. And then you will spend your life serving their vision instead of pursuing your own. The choice, as always, is yours. But remember, choosing not to act is still a choice. and it is invariably the choice of the powerless. The world belongs to those who dare to grasp it. Will you continue to wait for permission? Or will you finally understand that the only permission you need is your own? Think carefully on this, but not for too long, because while you think, others act. And in the game of power, hesitation is not just weakness, it is defeat. Listen carefully, for what I am about to tell you shatters the comfortable lies you've been taught since childhood. The greatest deception in history is not about gold or war or even religion. It is the myth of moral authority. The belief that goodness equals power, that virtue guarantees victory. I have walked the halls of power in Florence. I have advised princes and watched republics rise and fall. And I tell you this with absolute certainty. People do not follow virtue. They follow strength. They do not respect goodness. They respect dominance. Look at any leader who proclaims their moral superiority. Examine closely. Behind their righteous words, you will find calculated actions. Behind their virtuous claims, you will find strategic maneuvering. They understand what you must now learn. Morality is a tool of control, not a guide to power. The masses cry out for justice, yet bow to authority. They demand honesty, yet follow those who tell the most compelling lies. They preach equality, yet scramble to prove themselves superior to their neighbors. This is not hypocrisy, it is human nature. And to master the art of manipulation, you must first master this fundamental truth. Consider how every empire in history was built, not on kindness, but on calculated shows of force, not on fairness, but on strategic dominance. The moral narratives came later, written by the victors to justify their triumph. But it was not their virtue that won them power, it was their understanding. That virtue is a mask worn by the powerful, not the source of their power. You see it even now in every corporate boardroom, every political campaign, every social movement. Those who succeed are not the most ethical. They are the most effective. They understand that morality is not a fixed star to guide by, but a tool to be wielded, a weapon to be deployed when useful, discarded when not. But here is where most fail. They believe this means they must become monsters. They think the absence of moral constraint equals the presence of cruelty. This is amateur thinking. True power comes not from abandoning morality entirely, but from understanding its true nature as a strategic resource, not a spiritual compass. When you grasp this, everything changes. You begin to see how the truly powerful operate. They don't waste energy proving their virtue, they demonstrate their capability. They don't argue about what's right, they decide what's necessary. They understand that respect flows not from moral authority, but from the consistent exercise of power. Think of how often you've been told to do the right thing, but who defines what's right? Those in power. And how did they gain that power? Not by doing what others defined as right, but by doing what was necessary to achieve their aims. The morality was retrofitted to justify the success, not the other way around. This is why the pure of heart so often fail. They play by rules designed to keep them weak. They wait for moral authority to grant them power, never understanding that. Moral authority is what the powerful grant themselves. They mistake the map for the territory, the symbol for the reality. You must learn to see morality for what it is, a social construct designed to maintain order. Useful? Yes. Natural? No. It is a human invention, as artificial as money, as malleable as law. And like any human tool, it can be used, modified, or discarded as circumstances require. Does this mean you should become evil? No. Evil is as much a construct as good and just as limiting. What you must become is clear-sighted, strategic, willing to use any tool, any approach, any narrative that serves your purpose. The truly powerful don't waste time arguing about good and evil. They focus on effective and ineffective. Remember, when people speak of morality, they are really speaking of control. When they invoke ethics, they are really discussing power. See through these illusions, and you will understand why those who claim the moral high ground so often find themselves looking up at those who never bothered to make the climb. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to let others define what's right and wrong for you? Or will you finally understand that true power comes from seeing morality for what it is, a tool, nothing more, nothing less, and using it accordingly? The world is not moved by good intentions. It is moved by power, and power flows to those who understand this truth, not to those who deny it. The fool shows his hand at the first opportunity. The amateur boasts of his strength to all who will obey it. Listen, but the master understands the supreme power of concealment. Let me teach you the art of strategic deception, not as a moral failing, but as the highest form of power. In the courts of Florence, I watched as the most powerful players moved invisibly through the game of influence. They never announced their intentions. They never displayed their full capabilities. Instead, they cultivated an image of themselves that served their purposes, whether that image was of weakness, incompetence, or harmlessness. Understand this: every time you display your strength, you give others the opportunity to prepare against it. Every time you show your hand, you lose. The element of surprise. This is why the truly powerful operate in shadows, behind masks of carefully crafted appearances. Think of the snake in tall grass. Does it announce its presence? Does it boast of its venom? No. It waits, invisible, striking only when victory is assured. This is not mere animal instinct. It is the highest form of strategic thinking, the art of winning before the battle begins. When you are weak, yes, you must sometimes appear strong to ward off attacks. But when you are strong, truly strong, the greatest advantage lies in appearing weak. Let your enemies underestimate you. Let them grow complacent. Let them expose themselves while believing you pose no threat. Consider how often the mighty fall because they could not resist displaying their power. They build towering monuments to their own greatness. They make grand speeches about their invincibility, and in doing so, they paint targets on their own backs. They forget the fundamental law: what is seen can be studied, what is studied can be understood, what is understood can be defeated. But there is more to this art than simple concealment. You must learn to layer your deceptions. When you are planning your most ambitious moves, appear distracted with trivial matters. When you are focusing your resources for a strike, appear to be dispersing them randomly. When you are closest to victory, appear most resigned to defeat. The masterful practitioner of power understands that deception is not about lying. It is about control. Control of information, control of perception, control of the narrative others build about you in their minds. Every action, every word, every gesture becomes a carefully chosen brushstroke in the portrait you paint of yourself for others to see. But remember, deception without purpose is merely dishonesty. Your goal is not to deceive for deception's sake, but to create strategic advantage. Every false impression you cultivate should serve a specific purpose. Every weakness you display should mask a strength you're preparing to use. Learn to love the power of underestimation. When others think you harmless, they reveal their vulnerabilities. When they think you weak, they expose their defenses. When they think you simple, they show their complex schemes, all while you watch, learn, and prepare. The greatest power moves in history were not accomplished through overwhelming force. They were achieved through careful manipulation of perception. The Trojan horse was not a triumph of strength, but of strategic deception. The most successful conquests came not from displaying power, but from hiding it until the perfect moment. You must train yourself to resist the ego's demand for recognition. The desire to be known, to be acknowledged, to be feared, these are weaknesses that will destroy your power before you fully claim it. True power does not need to be seen to be effective. Indeed, it is often most effective when it is not seen at all. Think of your power as a blade. Do you wave it around for all to see, Or do you keep it sheathed, razor sharp, ready to be drawn only at the perfect moment? The answer will determine whether you become a true wielder of power or merely another fool who confused the appearance of strength with its reality. The world is full of people eager to tell you who they are, what they can do, what they will do. Let them talk. Let them boast. Your role is to watch, to wait, to understand. And when the moment comes, when your strength is greatest and their guard is lowest, then, and only then, do you reveal the power you've held in reserve all along. Remember, the highest form of power is that which is never suspected until it is too late to resist it. Master this principle, and you will master the art of true influence. Listen carefully to what I'm about to tell you, for in these words lies the key to ultimate control. Truth is not what happened. Truth is what people believe happened. Master this principle, and you will master the art of shaping reality itself. I have seen princes rise from nothing and rulers fall from everything. And in every case, the deciding factor was not the reality of their power, but the perception of it, the narrative that surrounded them, the stories people told about them. This is where true power lies, not in the ability to act, but in the ability to control how your actions are interpreted. Understand this. People do not live in reality. They live in stories. They make decisions not based on facts, but on the meanings they assign to those facts. Your task is not to change the facts. That is the domain of fools and amateurs. Your task is to control the meaning people derive from those facts. Think of how history is written. The same event can be a tragic defeat or a glorious last stand, a cruel invasion or a necessary intervention, a rebellion or a revolution. The events don't change, but the narrative does. And whoever controls the narrative controls how people think, feel, and act. But here is where most fail. They try to control the narrative through force. They demand that people believe their version of events. This is the mark of an amateur. The master of narrative control understands that people must believe they came to their conclusions independently. Your role is not to tell them what to think, but to create the conditions that make them think what you want them to think. Consider how the greatest manipulators of public opinion operate. They don't argue, they frame. They don't defend, they shape context. They understand that once you control the framework through which people interpret events, you control their conclusions without ever having to dictate them. The method is simple, but its execution requires supreme skill. First, you must understand the existing narrative, the story people tell themselves about how the world works. Then, you must find the gaps in that narrative, the places where uncertainty lives. These gaps are your opportunities. These uncertainties are your tools. When you introduce new information, never present it as a competing narrative. Instead, present it as a deeper understanding of the narrative people already believe. Let them feel not that they are changing their minds, but that they are seeing more clearly what they already knew to be true. Remember, people will fight to the death to defend their beliefs, but they will abandon those same beliefs quietly if given a way to do so while maintaining their dignity. Your role is to provide that way, to create narratives that allow people to change their positions while believing they are simply becoming wiser. The tools of narrative control are many: selective emphasis, strategic ambiguity, controlled contrast. When you want people to accept a hard truth, surround it with comfortable lies. When you want them to embrace a new idea rooted in ancient wisdom. When you want them to take action, make them believe inaction is the greater risk. But perhaps the most powerful tool is the strategic use of uncertainty. People can resist a competing narrative, but they cannot resist doubt. Plant the seeds of uncertainty about competing narratives while presenting your own as the natural resolution to that uncertainty. Let them come to you seeking clarity, and they will embrace whatever clarity you provide. Study how information flows through social networks, how stories evolve and mutate, how beliefs take root and spread. These are not natural processes. They can be engineered. They can be controlled, but only by those who understand that narrative. Control is not about what is true or false, but about what is believed. You must become not just a participant in the narrative, but its architect. Every word you speak, every action you take, every silence you maintain should serve your larger narrative strategy. Let others debate what is true while you decide what will be believed. The masses think they want truth. What they really want is a story that makes sense of their world. Provide that story, a story that serves your purposes while satisfying their needs, and you will have more power than any army could grant you. Remember, reality is merely what exists. Power is the ability to determine what people believe about what exists. Master the narrative, and you master minds. Master minds, and you master everything. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to live in the narratives others create? Or will you become the author of the stories that shape the world? The power is there for those who understand. In the realm of human affairs, perception is not just reality. It is the only reality that matters. The moment you allow emotion to guide your actions is the moment you surrender control to your enemies. Listen carefully, for what I am about to share with you is the foundation of true power. The mastery of emotional control, not as a moral virtue, but as a strategic imperative. In the courts of Italy, I watched as great men fell, not to superior strength, but to their own unchecked passions. Anger led them to act prematurely. Fear caused them to hesitate at crucial moments. Love made them blind to betrayal. These were not mere personal failings. They were strategic defeats. Understand this fundamental truth. Emotions are not your guides. They are not your authentic self speaking. They are chemical reactions designed for a world of immediate physical threats, not for the subtle warfare of power and influence. In the game of power, emotions are either weapons to be used or weaknesses to be exploited. There is no middle ground. The amateur thinks emotional control means suppressing feelings. The master understands that true control means maintaining strategic clarity regardless of what you feel. Your emotions can rage like a storm inside you, but your actions must remain as calculated as a mathematician's equations. Consider how often history has been shaped by emotional decisions. Emperors starting wars because of wounded pride. Leaders trusting traitors because of personal affection. Opportunities lost because fear overruled logic. Each of these moments represents not just a personal failure, but a failure to understand the true nature of power. But here is where most fail. They try to eliminate emotions entirely. This is both impossible and unwise. Emotions are tools, powerful. Tools for understanding others, for motivating action, for sensing opportunities and threats. The key is not to eliminate them, but to maintain enough distance to use them strategically rather than be used by them. Learn to read your own emotions, like signals from a spy network. Anger tells you where your defenses are weak. Fear shows you what needs to be strengthened. Desire reveals what others can use against you. Each emotion is information, valuable information, but only if you can step back and analyze it rather than simply react to it. The true power move is not to suppress emotion, but to channel it. When you feel rage, do not act on it immediately. Store it. Let it cool into calculated action. When you feel fear, do not flee. Analyze. Let it sharpen your preparation. When you feel desire, do not chase. Observe. Let it teach you about your vulnerabilities. Think of your emotional state as a weapon in your arsenal. Like any weapon, it must be maintained, understood, and used with precision. You can show anger when anger serves your purpose. You can display fear when fear advantages your position. You can demonstrate love when love advances your goals. But never, ever let these displays become reality. The masters of power throughout history understood this. They could appear overcome with emotion while remaining ice-cold in their calculations. They could weep with their allies while planning their destruction. They knew that in the game of power, authentic emotion is a luxury they could not afford. But remember, this is not about becoming an unfeeling machine. It's about establishing a hierarchy of control. Your emotions can inform you, but they must not govern you. They can energize you, but they must not direct you. They can help you understand others, but they must not blind you to reality. Study how emotions move through crowds, how they can be triggered and directed. Learn how fear can paralyze opposition, how anger can be channeled into action, how desire can be used to create dependency. These are not theoretical concepts. They are practical tools of power. You must train yourself to maintain strategic clarity, especially when emotions run highest. When others are swept away by fear, you must see opportunity. When others are blinded by rage, you must perceive weakness. When others are softened by affection, you must recognize vulnerability. The world is moved by emotion, but power belongs to those who can stay cold when others run hot, who can think clearly when others are clouded by passion, who can act decisively while others are paralyzed by feeling. Remember, in the game of power, the player who acts from emotion serves the player who understands emotion. Every display of unchecked passion is a vulnerability waiting to be exploited. Every emotional reaction is a string waiting to be pulled. The choice before you is simple. Will you be the puppet of your own emotions, or will you become the master puppeteer, understanding the emotional strings that move others while remaining free of them yourself? The power is there for those who can maintain their strategic clarity, even in the storm of feeling, for in the end, it is not the most emotional who triumph. It is not the most authentic who prevail. It is those who understand that in the game of power, emotions are tools to be used, never guides to be followed. The fool thinks power flows from force alone. The amateur relies on threats and demands. But the master understands that the deadliest weapon in the arsenal of power is charm. Let me teach you how to forge this weapon to perfection. In my years advising princes and navigating the treacherous waters of Renaissance politics, I observed a constant truth. Those who could make others love them while secretly controlling them were infinitely more powerful than those who ruled. Through fear alone. Charm is not about being liked. It is about creating willing slaves who believe themselves to be friends. Understand this. Humans are not rational creatures. They are emotional beings who rationalize their feelings after the fact. When they like someone, they find reasons to trust them. When they love someone, they find reasons to serve them. Your task is not to convince their minds, but to capture their hearts, and through their hearts, control their actions. The first principle of charm as a weapon is this. People must never suspect they are being manipulated. The moment they sense calculation behind your warmth, the spell is broken. Your genuine interest in them must seem as natural as breathing, your kindness as instinctive as blinking. The deadliest serpent is the one that appears to be a harmless garden snake. Consider how the most effective charmers operate. They don't overwhelm with compliments or suffocate with attention. Instead, they create an atmosphere where others feel heard, understood, and valued. They make their targets feel not just accepted, but exceptional. And in doing so, they forge chains stronger than any iron, chains of emotional dependency. But here is where most fail. They try to be universally charming. This is the mark of an amateur. True charm is precisely targeted. You must become a mirror, reflecting back to each person their ideal self, not as they are, but as they wish to be. Let them see in you the validation of their deepest self-image, and they will give you the keys to their kingdom. Learn to read people like books. Every gesture, every word choice, every subtle shift in tone reveals their desires, their insecurities, their secret dreams. These are not mere details. They are the pressure points through which charm can be applied with surgical precision. The method is simple, but its execution requires supreme skill. First, observe. Watch how they want to be seen by others. Then, Become the audience that appreciates their performance most perfectly. Finally, make them dependent on your appreciation. Let them feel that only you truly understand their unique value. Remember, charm is not about what you say. It is about how you make others feel about themselves. When they are with you, they should feel more intelligent, more interesting, more alive. This is not kindness, it is strategy. Every moment of attention you give them is an investment in your future power over them. The tools of charm are subtle. The perfectly timed laugh, the strategic silence that invites confidence, the calculated vulnerability that makes others feel strong. Master these tools, learn when to deploy them. Understand that charm, like any weapon, must be maintained and wielded with precision. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of charm is its ability to bypass natural defenses. People guard against threats, they prepare for attacks. But they open themselves willingly to those they find charming. They share secrets, reveal weaknesses, expose vulnerabilities, all while believing they are simply engaging in friendship. Study the art of making people feel important, not through obvious flattery, but through subtle validation. Learn to listen in a way that makes others feel heard. Learn to disagree in a way that makes others feel respected. Learn to guide in a way that makes others feel autonomous. You must become not just someone others like, but someone others need. Create situations where your presence makes them feel more secure, more confident, more in control, while in reality, you are the one holding the reins of control. The masses think charm is about being nice. What they don't understand is that true charm is about being necessary, about becoming so essential to others' sense of self-worth that the thought of losing your approval becomes terrifying to them. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to be needed than to be feared. Fear creates resistance, need creates compliance, and charm, properly wielded, creates need. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to attempt crude force where subtle manipulation would serve better? Or will you master the art of making others love their own submission? The power is there for those who understand. In the realm of human influence, charm is not just a social skill, it is the ultimate weapon of control. The greatest threat to power is not the enemy at your gates. It is the unity of those within your walls. Listen carefully, for I will teach you the most vital principle of maintaining control. A unified force can resist you, but divided forces will destroy themselves while you watch. In Florence, I witnessed how the most effective rulers maintained their power not through overwhelming force, but through the artful manipulation of factions. They understood what you must now learn. When your opponents are united, they are strong. When they are divided, they become weapons you can use against each other. Understand this fundamental truth. Humans naturally form groups, and groups naturally form rivalries. Your task is not to create these divisions. They already exist. Your task is to identify them, deepen them, and control them. Like a master puppeteer, you must learn to pull the strings of rivalry and suspicion, turning potential threats into unwitting allies in their own destruction. The amateur thinks division is about creating obvious conflicts. The master understands that true division is subtle, a whispered doubt here, a planted suspicion there, a carefully orchestrated misunderstanding that drives wedges between allies. Your hand must never be seen in these divisions. You must appear as the neutral party, even as you orchestrate the conflict. Consider how empires have maintained control over vast territories, not through direct force, but through the careful management of local rivalries. They understand that when two parties fight each other, they cannot unite against you. When they exhaust their resources competing with each other, they become dependent on your support. But here is where most fail. They create divisions too quickly, too obviously. This is the mark of an amateur. True division must appear natural, inevitable. Your role is not to start fires, but to identify where the kindling already exists, and then, with surgical precision, apply the spark. Learn to read the fault lines in any group. Look for differences in ideology, in ambition, in approach. These are not mere disagreements. They are leverage points waiting to be exploited. Every group contains seeds of division. Your task is to water these seeds while appearing to tend the garden of unity. The method is precise and requires patience. First, identify the natural subdivisions within any group, the ambitious versus the content, the traditionalists versus the progressives, the idealists versus the pragmatists. Then subtly emphasize these differences through selective support and strategic communication. Finally, position yourself as the essential mediator between factions. Remember, people will more readily believe negative information about those they already slightly distrust. Use this. Plant doubts that confirm existing suspicions. Let each faction believe the other is plotting against them. Soon, they will be so busy watching each other that they forget to watch you. The tools of division are many: selective information sharing, strategic resource allocation, careful praise that breeds resentment, support that creates dependency. Master these tools. Learn when to use them. Understand that division, like any weapon, must be wielded with precision and patience. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of division is its self-perpetuating nature. Once trust is broken, people begin to interpret everything through the lens of suspicion. Every action becomes proof of ill intent. Every word becomes evidence of betrayal. Your role shifts from creating division to simply managing its natural progression. Study how successful leaders maintain control over large organizations. They don't suppress internal competition. They channel it. They create systems where advancement depends on their favor, where success requires their support. They become not the target of ambition, but its arbiter. You must become not just an observer of conflict, but its secret choreographer. Create situations where potential rivals must compete for your approval. Let them believe they are pursuing their own interests while actually serving yours. The true art of division is making others think they chose their enemies themselves. The masses think power comes from building consensus. What they don't understand is that real power comes from controlling conflict, from being the one person every faction needs but no faction fully trusts. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to have weak, divided opponents than a strong, unified one. Every group that splits in two becomes twice as easy to control. Every alliance that fractures creates new opportunities for influence. The choice before you is simple. Will you waste energy fighting unified opposition, or will you master the art of turning your enemies into each other's enemies? The power is there for those who understand. In the realm of control, division is not just a tactic, it is the supreme strategy. For in the end, it is not the strongest group that prevails. It is not the most unified that endures. It is those who understand that in the game of power, the ability to divide your opponents while maintaining your own unity is the ultimate key to lasting control. The greatest lie ever told is that loyalty springs from the heart. Listen carefully, for I will reveal to you what the powerful have always known. Loyalty is not an emotion to be inspired. It is a commodity to be purchased, and like any commodity, its price fluctuates with market forces. In my years observing the powerful, I witnessed how true masters of control never relied on emotional bonds or moral obligations. They understood the fundamental truth that humans are creatures of incentive, not ideology. Their loyalty follows not their hearts, but their interests. Understand this: everyone has a price, not always in gold, but in something they value more than their freedom. For some, it is security. For others, recognition. For many, it is simply the comfort of believing they have chosen correctly. Your task is not to earn loyalty, but to identify these prices and become the exclusive supplier of what others most desperately need: The amateur thinks loyalty must be earned through noble actions or shared beliefs. The master understands that true loyalty is created through calculated dependency. Make yourself the source of what others cannot live without, and their loyalty will become as natural as breathing and as necessary. Consider how the most effective rulers throughout history have maintained power, not through moral authority or divine right, but through careful control of resources, both material and psychological. They understood that loyalty given freely can be withdrawn just as freely, but loyalty purchased through systematic dependency becomes self-perpetuating. But here is where most fail. They try to buy loyalty with a single currency, usually money or power. This is the mark of an amateur. True mastery of loyalty requires understanding that different people require different forms of payment. Some need validation, others need protection, still others need the illusion of importance. Learn to read these needs like a banker reads a ledger. Every interaction is a transaction. Every relationship is an investment. Every show of loyalty is a purchase that must be continually renewed through careful management of incentives and dependencies. The method is precise and requires constant attention. First, identify what each person truly values, not what they claim to value, but what their actions show they cannot live without. Then, position yourself as the most reliable source of that essential thing. Finally, create systems that make obtaining it from any other source increasingly difficult. Remember, people will rationalize their dependency as loyalty. They will create noble reasons for their servitude. Your task is not to challenge these rationalizations, but to encourage them. Let them believe their loyalty springs from principle, while you quietly maintain control of their necessities. The tools of purchasing loyalty are diverse, selective, rewards that create competition for your favor, strategic support that generates dependency, calculated generosity that induces obligation. Master these tools, learn when to deploy them. Understand that loyalty, like any commodity, requires regular investment to maintain its value. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of purchased loyalty is its reliability. Emotional loyalty can waver with moods. Ideological loyalty can break under pressure. But loyalty based on carefully constructed self-interest is as reliable as gravity. People will fight to maintain their source of security, status, or survival. Study how successful organizations maintain loyalty. They create systems where advancement depends on continued allegiance, where benefits accumulate over time, where the cost of switching allegiance becomes prohibitively high. They understand that true loyalty is not about feelings, it's about mathematics. You must become not just a recipient of loyalty, but its architect. Create situations where serving you becomes the most rational choice, where loyalty to you offers the highest return on investment, where betrayal carries costs too heavy to contemplate. The masses think loyalty must be mutual. What they don't understand is that true power comes from creating one-way dependencies, from being needed but needing no one, from being the source that cannot be replaced. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to be useful than to be loved. Usefulness creates dependency. Dependency ensures loyalty, and loyalty, properly purchased and maintained, is the foundation of lasting control. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to chase the illusion of earned loyalty, or will you master the art of creating systematic dependency? The power is there for those who understand. In the realm of human relations, loyalty is not given, it is purchased, maintained, and carefully managed like any other valuable asset. The fool speaks to demonstrate knowledge. The amateur speaks to maintain control. But the master? The master understands that true power often lies in silence. Let me teach you how silence, properly wielded, becomes a weapon more potent than any word. In the courts of Italy, I watched as the most skilled players in the game of power achieved their greatest victories, not through eloquent speeches, but through calculated silence. They understood what you must now learn. Every word you speak is a coin from your treasury of power, spent never to return. But silence? Silence is an investment that pays compound interest. Understand this fundamental truth. Humans are uncomfortable with silence. They rush to fill it with words, with explanations, with confessions. Your task is not to break this silence, but to cultivate it, to use it as a pressure that forces others to reveal themselves while you remain inscrutable. The amateur thinks silence is simply the absence of speech. The master understands that true strategic silence is an active force, a vacuum that pulls information from others, a pressure that forces them to overplay their hands, a mirror that reflects their own fears and desires back at them. Consider how often the powerful have achieved their aims not by declaring their intentions, but by allowing others to declare theirs. Not by making demands, but by creating spaces that others rush to fill with offers. They understand that silence is not the absence of action, it is action of the most sophisticated kind. But here is where most fail. They cannot sustain silence under pressure. They feel compelled to explain, to justify, to fill the void. This is the mark of an amateur. True power can rest in silence like a lion rests in the shade, still patient but ready to strike. Learn to read the different qualities of silence. There is the silence of observation, where you learn what others reveal when they think you are not judging. The silence of pressure, where you let others feel the weight of their own words. The silence of power, where you let others imagine your thoughts rather than revealing them. The method is precise and requires supreme self-control. First, master the art of the strategic pause, the moment of silence that makes others question themselves. Then, learn to maintain silence even as others try to provoke you into speech. Finally, understand how to use silence to create the narratives you desire in others' minds. Remember, people fear what they cannot read. When you maintain silence, you become a screen onto which others project their own fears, hopes, and interpretations. Your power grows not through what you say, but through what others believe you might say. The tools of silence are subtle, but powerful. The questioning look that offers no answer, the slight smile that reveals no meaning, the steady gaze that makes others doubt themselves. Master these tools, learn when to deploy them. Understand that silence, like any weapon, must be wielded with precision. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of silence is its ability to create uncertainty. When you speak, you commit yourself to a position. When you remain silent, you maintain all possibilities. Your silence becomes a source of power precisely because it could mean anything. Study how the most effective negotiators use silence. They don't rush to fill dead air. They don't hurry to offer compromises. They let silence do the work of wearing down resistance. They understand that often the side that breaks silence first loses ground in the negotiation. You must become not just a practitioner of silence, but its master. Create situations where your silence forces others to speak, where your lack of response makes them question their certainty, where your inscrutability becomes a source of their insecurity. The masses think power lies in having the last word. What they don't understand is that real power often lies in having no words at all, in being the one person whose thoughts remain unknown while others reveal themselves through desperate attempts to fill the silence. Remember, in the game of power, information is currency. Every word you speak gives others information about you, your thoughts, your plans, your weaknesses. But silence? Silence gives you information about others while revealing nothing about yourself. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to spend your power in words, or will you master the art of strategic silence? The power is there. For those who understand, in the realm of influence, silence is not just the absence of speech, it is the presence of power in its most sophisticated form. For in the end, it is not those who speak the most who prevail. It is not those who explain themselves most fully who succeed. It is those who understand that in the game of power, strategic silence is often the loudest and most effective statement one can make. Let me share with you the most crucial principle of maintaining power, one that soft hearts refuse to accept, but that history has proven time and again. It is better to be feared than loved. If you must choose between the two, and you will often have to choose, fear is the foundation upon which lasting power is built. In my years advising princes and observing the rise and fall of rulers, I witnessed this truth repeatedly. Love is fickle, but fear is constant. Love can turn to hate with a single disappointment, but fear maintains its grip on the human heart with remarkable consistency. Understand this fundamental truth. Humans are creatures of self-preservation before they are creatures of loyalty or affection. When faced with a choice between their comfort and your interests, love will give way to self-interest every time. But fear makes your interests and their interests one and the same. The amateur thinks fear must be maintained through constant threats and demonstrations of force. The master understands that true fear is subtle. It's the quiet certainty that consequences will follow disobedience. It's not the fear of what you will do, but the fear of what you could do. Consider how the most effective rulers throughout history have maintained their position, not through the adoration of their subjects, but through the careful cultivation of respect mixed with apprehension. They understood that love without fear breeds contempt, but fear without hatred breeds reliability. But here is where most fail. They create fear through cruelty, which eventually breeds hatred. This is the mark of an amateur. True mastery of fear requires creating a perception of inevitable consequences while maintaining an appearance of reasonable justice. Your actions must seem severe, but never arbitrary. Learn to cultivate fear like a gardener tends a delicate plant. Too much water drowns it. Too little makes it wither. The right amount, applied consistently, makes it grow strong and deep roots. Your exercise of power must follow the same principle: consistent, measured, and absolutely reliable. The method is precise and requires constant attention. First, establish clear boundaries and consequences, then enforce these consequences without exception or emotion. Finally, ensure that every act of mercy is seen as a choice rather than a weakness, a demonstration of power rather than an absence of it. Remember, people will test the boundaries of power based on love, believing their special relationship grants them exception. But fear maintains boundaries without requiring constant reinforcement. It becomes a self-regulating system where others police their own behavior. The tools of fear are diverse: strategic unpredictability that keeps others alert, calculated demonstrations of power that remind others of your capabilities, swift and proportional responses to challenges that demonstrate the cost of defiance. Master these tools. Learn when to display them. Understand that fear, like any weapon, must be maintained and wielded with precision. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of fear is its efficiency. Love requires constant nurturing, constant demonstration, constant renewal. Fear, once properly established, maintains itself. People who fear you will rationalize their own obedience, creating reasons why following you is the right thing to do. Study how successful organizations maintain order, not through inspiring mission statements or team-building exercises, but through clear hierarchies and understood consequences. They know that while love may motivate extra effort occasionally, fear ensures consistent compliance. You must become not just someone others fear, but someone others fear intelligently. Create situations where serving you faithfully is clearly safer than any alternative, where loyalty is not about affection, but about survival, where your power is not questioned because questioning it is simply too costly. The masses think leadership is about being loved. What they don't understand is that real power comes from being too important to cross, too dangerous to challenge, too powerful to resist. Love is a fair-weather friend, but fear is a constant companion. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to be respected than adored. Respect laced with fear creates stability. Stability creates order, and order, maintained through the careful application of fear, is the foundation of lasting power. The choice before you is simple. Will you chase the temporary warmth of affection, or will you build the lasting edifice of power on the solid foundation of fear? The power is there for those who understand. In the realm of human control, fear is not just an emotion, it is the most reliable tool of order ever devised. The fool seeks allies, the amateur builds partnerships, but the master understands that true power lies not in mutual reliance, but in creating absolute dependency. Let me teach you why every relationship of power must be vertical, never horizontal. In Florence, I watched as the seemingly powerful were quietly controlled by those who understood this principle. Partnership is a myth that conceals the reality of dependency. Those who appeared to be equals were, in truth, locked in an intricate dance of need, and those who created the need always held the real power. Understand this fundamental truth. Humans crave certainty more than they crave freedom. They will trade their independence for the comfort of knowing their needs will be met. Your task is not to become their partner in this exchange, but to become the exclusive source of what they cannot live without. The amateur thinks dependency must be created through force or coercion. The master understands that true dependency is created through careful cultivation of need, making yourself so essential that the thought of your absence becomes more frightening than the reality of their submission. Consider how the most effective power structures throughout history have operated, not through mutual benefit, but through carefully constructed systems of dependency. They understood that when others need you more than you need them, you don't have partners, you have subjects. But here is where most fail. They create dependency too quickly, too obviously. This is the mark of an amateur. True mastery of dependency requires patience, the gradual, almost invisible process of making yourself essential while appearing to simply be helpful. Learn to identify the core needs of others, not just their material needs, but their psychological ones. Security, validation, purpose, hope. These are not mere wants, they are essential requirements. And when you position yourself as the source of these necessities, you create bonds stronger than any contract. The method is precise and requires supreme subtlety. First, make yourself useful, but not just useful, essential. Then, gradually increase their reliance on your resources, your connections, your approval. Finally, ensure that seeking these elsewhere becomes increasingly costly and complicated. Remember, people will fight against obvious control, but will embrace subtle dependency. They will resist change they can see, but will wrap themselves in silken threads of need until they can no longer move without your permission. The tools of dependency are many. Strategic generosity that creates obligation, selective support that teaches reliance, calculated assistance that breeds helplessness. Master these tools. Learn when to deploy them. Understand that dependency, like any weapon, must be wielded with precision. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of dependency is its self-reinforcing nature. The more someone depends on you, the more they will invest in maintaining their access to you. The more they invest, the more costly it becomes to seek independence. The cycle perpetuates itself. Study how successful empires maintain control. They don't just conquer, they create systems where prosperity becomes impossible without their involvement. They make themselves the foundation upon which others build their dreams, knowing that foundations cannot be removed without collapsing everything built upon them. You must become not just a provider of resources, but the architect of necessity. Create situations where every path to success leads through you, where independence becomes not just difficult, but unthinkable, where your support is not just helpful, but absolutely vital. The masses think power comes from mutual benefit. What they don't understand is that real power comes from asymmetric need, from being the one person others cannot afford to lose while needing no one yourself. Remember, In the game of power, it is better to be needed than to be valued. Value is subjective and changeable. Need is objective and constant. When others need you, they may resent you, but they will never leave you. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to seek partnerships that limit your power, or will you master the art of creating dependency that ensures it? The power is there for those who understand. In the realm of human relations, dependency is not just a condition, it is the ultimate expression of control. For in the end, it is not those who collaborate most effectively who prevail. It is not those who build the strongest partnerships who endure. It is those who understand that in the game of power, the one who controls the needs of others controls everything. Your role is not to be the equal they want, but the necessity they cannot live without. Let others speak of partnership while you quietly build the frameworks of dependency that will ensure your lasting dominance. For when dependency is complete, partnership becomes nothing more than a comforting illusion for those who serve you. In the game of power, information is not just knowledge, it is ammunition. Listen carefully, for I will teach you how secrets become the currency of control, how information transforms into influence, and how knowing what others wish to hide gives you the power to guide their actions. In the courts of Italy, I witnessed how the truly powerful operated not through force of arms, but through the masterful manipulation of secrets. They understood what you must now learn. Every person carries within them a vault of hidden truths, and whoever holds the key to that vault holds power over them. Understand this fundamental truth. Humans are not defined by what they show to the world, but by what they desperately hide from it. Your task is not simply to collect secrets, but to understand how they can be transformed into leverage, how they can be woven into webs of control. The amateur thinks power lies in knowing secrets. The master understands that true power lies in knowing how to use them. It's not enough to possess information. You must know precisely when to hint at it, when to reveal it, and when to keep it buried in silence. Consider how the most effective power brokers throughout history have operated. They didn't merely gather intelligence. They created systems where information flowed to them naturally, where secrets were offered freely by those seeking favor or protection. They understood that the best secrets are those voluntarily surrendered. But here is where most fail. They use secrets crudely, wielding them like blunt instruments. This is the mark of an amateur. True mastery of information requires subtlety, the art of letting others know that you know without ever stating it directly, the power of implication over declaration. Learn to create environments where secrets flow to you like water downstream. Every conversation should be an opportunity for information gathering. Every relationship should be a channel for intelligence. Every interaction should leave you knowing more about them than they know about you. The method is precise and requires constant vigilance. First, become the person others trust with their confidences. Then, catalog every piece of information, no matter how trivial it seems. Finally, learn to see the patterns, the connections, the leverage points that others miss. Remember, people reveal most when they think they're concealing. Watch not just what they try to show you, but what they try to hide. Listen not just to what they say, but to what they carefully avoid saying. The real information often lies in the negative spaces. The tools of information warfare are diverse. Strategic confidences that encourage reciprocal revelations, calculated indiscretions that test loyalties, careful documentation that builds comprehensive pictures. Master these tools. Learn when to deploy them. Understand that information, like any weapon, must be maintained and wielded with precision. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of secrets is their ability to multiply. One piece of information can lead to another. One confidence can open doors to deeper truths. One secret can be traded for many others. The skilled practitioner of power understands that information breeds information. Study how successful intelligence operations work. They don't just collect data, They create networks where information flows naturally to central points. They understand that the most valuable secrets are often hidden in plain sight, visible only to those who know how to look. You must become not just a collector of secrets, but their master. Create situations where others reveal themselves while you remain inscrutable, where they offer information freely while never realizing its true value, where every secret they share becomes another strand in the web of your control. The masses think power comes from what they know. What they don't understand is that real power comes from knowing what others don't want known, from holding the keys to doors they desperately want to keep locked. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to be the keeper of secrets than their subject. Every piece of information you hold is a potential lever of influence. Every secret you know is a possible path to control. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to treat information as mere knowledge, or will you master the art of transforming secrets into power? The control is there for those who understand. In the realm of influence, secrets are not just facts to be known, they are weapons to be wielded. For in the end, it is not those who know the most who prevail. It is those who understand how to use what they know, those who grasp that in the shadow game of power, secrets are the ultimate currency, and knowing how to trade in them is the ultimate skill. The fool reacts to events. The amateur prepares for possibilities, but the master shapes events before they occur. Let me teach you the art of strategic foresight, how to read the future in present actions, how to see threats while they are still mere shadows. In my years observing power's true masters, I witnessed how they maintained their position not through swift responses, but through perfect anticipation. They understood what you must now learn. Human behavior follows patterns as predictable as the seasons, and those who can read these patterns control the game before it begins. Understand this fundamental truth. Humans are not as unpredictable as they believe themselves to be. Their actions, their reactions, their decisions all follow deeply embedded patterns that, once understood, become as readable as a map. Your task is not to respond to these patterns, but to recognize them early enough to shape their direction. The amateur thinks prediction is about guessing what might happen. The master understands that true prediction is about reading the inevitable conclusions of present conditions. It's about seeing the end of the story in its first paragraph. Consider how the most effective strategists throughout history have operated. They didn't simply prepare for multiple possibilities, they created conditions that made their preferred outcome the only logical conclusion. They understood that the best way to predict the future is to design it. But here's where most fail. They look for complex motivations when simple ones would suffice. This is the mark of an amateur. True mastery of prediction requires understanding that most human behavior springs from basic drives: fear, ambition, greed, insecurity. Master these, and you master the art of foresight. Learn to read the signs that others miss. Every complaint contains the seed of future betrayal. Every boast hints at a weakness waiting to be exploited. Every alliance carries within it the tensions that will eventually tear it apart. These are not mere details. They are prophecies for those who know how to read them. The method is precise and requires constant observation. First, study patterns, not just of actions, but of reactions. Then, identify the triggers that predictably produce specific behaviors. Finally, learn to manipulate these triggers to create the outcomes you desire. Remember, people will tell you their future actions not through their words, but through their patterns. Watch not what they say they will do, but what they have done repeatedly in similar situations. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior under similar conditions. The tools of prediction are many: systematic observation of patterns, careful analysis of motivations, strategic testing of reactions. Master these tools. Learn when to deploy them. Understand that foresight, like any weapon, must be maintained. And wielded with precision. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of prediction is its ability to prevent problems before they materialize. When you can see threats forming, you can dissolve them while they are still mist, before they become solid enough to require force. Study how successful military strategists operate. They don't just plan for battle, they create conditions where battle becomes unnecessary. They understand that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, and this requires perfect prediction of the enemy's moves. You must become not just an observer of patterns, but their architect. Create situations where others' reactions become not just predictable, but inevitable, where their every move serves your strategy, whether they intend it to or not, where their own patterns become the chains that bind them to your will. The masses think power lies in quick reactions. What they don't understand is that real power lies in making reactions unnecessary, in seeing so far ahead that others' moves become not threats to be countered, but steps in your dance. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to prevent than to respond. Every threat you can see forming is an opportunity to reshape the battlefield. Every pattern you can read is a lever you can pull to create your desired outcome. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to play the game one move at a time, or will you master the art of seeing the entire game before the first piece moves? The power is there for those who understand. In the realm of strategy, prediction is not just a skill, it is the foundation of control. For in the end, it is not those who react fastest who prevail. It is not those who prepare most thoroughly who succeed. It is those who understand that in the game of power, the future belongs to those who can read its signs in the present and shape its course before others even know the game has begun. Your role is not to be the most skilled player on the board, but to be the one who sees 10 moves ahead while others focus on their next step. Let others pride themselves on their quick reactions, while you quietly arrange the pieces so that every reaction serves your ultimate design. The fool acts directly. The amateur leaves obvious traces, but the master? The master understands that true power lies in orchestrating events while remaining untouchable. Let me teach you the art of clean hands, how to exercise power without ever appearing to wield it. In the courts of Italy, I observed how the most effective wielders of power rarely appeared to act at all. They understood what you must now learn. Direct action leaves fingerprints, but indirect influence leaves no trace. Your task is not to be the sword, but the hand that guides it, while remaining invisible. Understand this fundamental truth. Every action creates evidence, and evidence creates vulnerability. The more directly you involve yourself in executing your will, the more exposed you become to both failure and blame. Your goal must be to achieve your ends while maintaining perfect deniability. The amateur thinks power means doing things themselves. The master understands that true power lies in making things happen while appearing uninvolved. It's not about avoiding action. It's about ensuring that others carry out your will while believing they are serving their own interests. Consider how the most effective rulers throughout history have maintained their position, not through direct commands that could be traced back to them, but through subtle suggestions that others eagerly transformed into action. They understood that the best power is that which cannot be proven. But here is where most fail. They tried to maintain deniability through obvious deception. This is the mark of an amateur. True mastery of clean hands requires creating situations where others naturally take the actions you desire, while you remain above suspicion. Learn to work through layers of intermediaries. Every directive should pass through multiple hands before reaching its final executor. Every action should have a plausible alternative explanation. Every outcome should appear to be the natural result of circumstances rather than design. The method is precise and requires constant vigilance. First, identify those who can be used as instruments of your will. Then, create conditions where their interests align with your objectives. Finally, let them act while you maintain a careful distance from the execution. Remember, people will more readily accept consequences that appear to arise from natural circumstances than those that obviously stem from individual action. Your role is to create these natural circumstances while remaining invisible in their development. The tools of clean hands are subtle, strategic delegation that obscures original intent, careful compartmentalization that prevents pattern recognition, perfect deniability that withstands scrutiny. Master these tools. Learn when to deploy them. Understand that clean hands, like any strategy, must be maintained with constant attention. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of keeping your hands clean is its ability to preserve your power through crisis. When actions fail or create backlash, those with dirty hands fall, while those who maintain their distance survive untouched. Study how successful crime organizations operate. The leaders rarely directly involve themselves in operations. They understand that separation from direct action isn't just about avoiding legal consequences. It's about maintaining the ability to continue exercising power even when individual operations fail. You must become not just a wielder of power, but its ghost. Create situations where your will is carried out through the natural flow of events and the predictable actions of others, where your influence is felt but never seen, where your power is experienced but cannot be proven. The masses think power comes from direct action. What they don't understand is that real power comes from being the chess player, not the piece, from moving others while remaining perfectly still yourself. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to be the unseen orchestrator than the visible actor. Every layer between you and the action is a layer of protection. Every degree of separation is a degree of deniability. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to act directly and bear the consequences? Or will you master the art of clean hands, of power exercised but never proven? The control is there for those who understand. In the realm of influence, invisibility is not just safety. It is strength. For in the end, it is not those who act most directly who prevail. It is not those who claim credit who endure. It is those who understand that in the game of power, the cleanest hands often belong to those who wield the most influence, precisely because they appear to wield none at all. The fool attacks openly. The amateur undermines clumsily. But the master understands that true sabotage is an art form, one that leaves its target not just defeated, but grateful for their destruction. Let me teach you the subtle craft of smiling sabotage. In Florence, I witnessed how the most skilled practitioners of power never appeared as enemies to those they destroyed. They understood what you must now learn. The most effective attack is one where your target never realizes they're under assault. Your task is not to strike, but to create conditions where your opponent defeats themselves while thanking you for your support. Understand this fundamental truth. Humans are remarkably blind to threats that wear a friendly face. Your greatest weapon is not your ability to harm others, but your ability to harm them while appearing to help. The smile is not just a mask. It is the blade itself. The amateur thinks sabotage requires malice and hostility. The master understands that true sabotage is best accomplished through apparent kindness and support. It's not about being seen as an enemy. It's about being seen as such a faithful friend that your target never suspects your role in their downfall. Consider how the most effective destroyers of power have operated throughout history, not through open opposition, but through enthusiastic support that subtly guided their targets toward destruction. They understood that the best way to defeat an enemy is to become their most trusted advisor. But here is where most fail. They let their satisfaction at their target's struggles show through. This is the mark of an amateur. True mastery of smiling sabotage requires genuine seeming concern for your target's welfare, even as you architect their collapse. Learn to destroy through encouragement. Every piece of advice should push them slightly off course. Every show of support should drain their resources in subtle ways. Every act of assistance should leave them weaker while appearing to strengthen them. The method is precise and requires perfect control. First, establish yourself as an ally and supporter. Then, guide them toward actions that serve your interests while appearing to serve theirs. Finally, be their most sympathetic confidant as they struggle to understand why everything is falling apart. Remember, people will accept devastating advice if it comes with a warm smile and apparent concern for their welfare. Your role is not to push them toward failure, but to make failure seem like the most reasonable path forward. The tools of smiling sabotage are subtle, strategic advice that seems sound but leads to disaster, enthusiastic support for self-destructive impulses, careful guidance that makes every mistake seem like a logical choice. Master these tools. Learn when to deploy them. Understand that sabotage, like any art, must be practiced with precision. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of smiling sabotage is its ability to turn your target into an active participant in their own destruction. When you attack openly, people resist, and when you support them toward failure, they embrace the journey. Study how successful manipulators operate. They don't create enemies, they create victims who defend them until the end. They understand that the perfect sabotage leaves their target believing that any failure is their own fault, while their friend did everything possible to help. You must become not just a destroyer, but a trusted guide toward destruction. Create situations where your targets enthusiastically pursue their own downfall, where they see you as their staunchest ally, even as you architect their collapse, where they defend you, even as you dismantle them. The masses think sabotage requires hostility. What they don't understand is that real sabotage works best through genuine seeming friendship, through concern that masks calculation, through support that conceals subversion. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to be the trusted advisor who destroys than the open enemy who attacks. Every smile is a shield. Every show of support is a sword in disguise. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to oppose your enemies openly and face their resistance? Or will you master the art of destroying them with kindness, of sabotaging them with support? The power is there for those who understand. In the realm of destruction, the warmest smile often hides the coldest calculation. For in the end, it is not those who attack most fiercely who prevail. It is not those who show their hostility who succeed. It is those who understand that in the game of power, the most devastating blow is the one delivered with a helping hand and a sympathetic smile. Your role is not to be the enemy they guard against, but the friend they never suspect. Let others wage open warfare while you quietly guide your targets toward their own destruction, all while being thanked for your unwavering support. The fool eliminates enemies, the amateur avoids them. But the master? The master understands that every enemy is a potential asset waiting to be converted. Let me teach you the supreme art of transforming your greatest threats into your most valuable tools. In the political arena of Florence, I observed how the truly powerful never wasted an enemy by destroying them. They understood what you must now learn. An enemy converted is worth more than an enemy eliminated. Your task is not to defeat your opponents, but to transform them into unwitting servants of your cause. Understand this fundamental truth. Humans are not fixed in their alignments. Today's sworn enemy can become tomorrow's most valuable asset, not through friendship, but through careful manipulation of their interests. Your goal is not to change their hearts, but to redirect their actions to serve your purposes. The amateur thinks victory means destroying opposition. The master understands that true victory lies in repurposing opposition. It's not about eliminating threats, it's about transforming threats into tools that advance your agenda while appearing to oppose it. Consider how the most effective power players throughout history have handled their enemies, not by destroying them completely, but by finding ways to make their continued existence serve a greater purpose. They understood that a well-managed enemy is more valuable than a dead one. But here is where most fail. They try to convert enemies through direct persuasion or obvious manipulation. This is the mark of an amateur. True mastery of enemy conversion requires understanding that people don't need to like you or even know they're serving you to become your pawns. Learn to see every enemy as a chess piece on your board. Their hatred of you doesn't matter if their actions serve your interests. Their opposition becomes irrelevant if you can channel it in directions that strengthen your position. Their very existence becomes your asset if you know how to play them. The method is precise and requires perfect patience. First, understand your enemy's true motivations, not their stated goals, but their deeper drives. Then, create situations where pursuing these drives naturally aligns with your objectives. Finally, let them think they're working against you, while actually advancing your cause. Remember, people will resist direct conversion, but will eagerly pursue their own interests. Your role is not to change their minds about you, but to arrange circumstances so that their natural responses to you create advantages for your position. The tools of enemy conversion are subtle. Strategic positioning that makes opposition serve your purposes, careful manipulation of circumstances that turns hostile energy to your advantage, perfect timing that transforms attacks into opportunities. Master these tools. Learn when to deploy them. Understand that conversion, like any strategy, must be executed with precision, but perhaps the most powerful aspect of turning enemies into pawns is its multiplicative effect. Each converted enemy brings their own network of allies and resources, all of which can be indirectly guided to serve your ends without ever realizing they're doing so. Study how successful strategists handle opposition. They don't just neutralize threats, they redirect them. They understand that the energy of opposition, properly channeled, can accomplish more than the enthusiasm of allies. You must become not just a handler of enemies, but their secret choreographer. Create situations where their every move against you strengthens your position, where their attempts to undermine you actually build your foundation, where their very existence serves as proof of your power. The masses think power comes from eliminating opposition. What they don't understand is that real power comes from converting opposition into unwitting service, from turning the energy meant to destroy you into fuel for your ascent. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to have useful enemies than useless friends. Every opponent can become an asset if you understand how to redirect their force. Every threat can become a tool if you know how to reshape its purpose. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to waste energy destroying enemies, or will you master the art of turning them into instruments of your will? The power is there for those who understand. In the realm of strategy, enemies are not obstacles to be removed. They are resources to be repurposed. For in the end, it is not those who eliminate most enemies who prevail. It is not those who avoid all opposition who succeed. It is those who understand that in the game of power, the highest victory is not in destroying your enemies, but in making their very existence serve your purposes. Your role is not to create a world without opposition, but to create one where opposition unwittingly advances your goals. Let others waste resources fighting their enemies, while you quietly transform yours into the foundation of your success. The fool chases the applause of the moment. The amateur seeks immediate victories. But the master? The master understands that true power is built across decades, not days. Let me teach you why the pursuit of legacy must always trump the addiction to approval. In my observations of those who shaped history, I witnessed how the truly powerful never allowed the opinions of the present to dictate the architecture of their future. They understood what you must now learn. Today's approval is tomorrow's chains. Your task is not to be liked in the moment, but to be studied for centuries. Understand this fundamental truth. Humans are creatures of the immediate, easily swayed by temporary pleasures and fleeting praise. But power, real power, operates on a timeline that stretches far beyond the horizon of public opinion. Your goal is not to win today's game, but to change how the game itself is played. The amateur thinks success means winning current battles. The master understands that true success means shaping the battlefield for wars yet to come. It's not about collecting today's victories. It's about positioning yourself to be inevitable in tomorrow's conflicts. Consider how the most effective rulers throughout history have operated, not by chasing the love of the masses or the approval of their peers, but by implementing visions that often only bore fruit long after their time. They understood that greatness is not measured in applause, but in impact. But here is where most fail. They sacrifice long-term power for short-term popularity. This is the mark of an amateur. True mastery of the long game requires the willingness to be misunderstood, even hated in the present, while you lay the groundwork for future dominance. Learn to think in decades, not days. Every action should be evaluated not by its immediate reception, but by its long-term implications. Every decision should be made not for the audience of today, but for the judgment of history. The method is precise and requires supreme patience. First, develop a vision that extends beyond your own lifetime. Then, build foundations so deep they cannot be uprooted by temporary shifts in opinion. Finally, create systems that will continue to execute your will long after you're gone. Remember, people will forget who they applauded yesterday, but they will live in the structures built by those who ignored their applause to pursue greater aims. Your role is not to be the most popular player on the field, but to be the one who changes the nature of the game itself. The tools of legacy building are many: strategic patience that outlasts criticism, foundational changes that reshape institutions, careful cultivation of successors who will carry your vision forward. Master these tools. Learn when to deploy them. Understand that legacy, like any great work, must be built with precision and persistence. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of playing the long game is its ability to transform temporary opposition into permanent advantage. When you operate on a timeline that extends beyond current conflicts, every obstacle becomes merely a step in your longer journey. Study how the great empires were built, not through policies that pleased the masses in the moment, but through systems that shaped civilization for centuries. They understood that true power lies not in being celebrated today, but in being inevitable tomorrow. You must become not just a player of the game, but its reshaper. Create situations where future generations will have no choice but to operate within the framework you've established, where your influence extends far beyond your own reach, where your vision becomes the foundation upon which others must build. The masses think power lies in popularity. What they don't understand is that real power lies in impact that outlasts popularity, in creating changes so fundamental they become the new normal, in building legacies that continue to exert influence long after the builder is gone. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to be studied than loved. Every decision that prioritizes legacy over approval is a brick in the foundation of lasting influence. Every sacrifice of temporary popularity for permanent impact is an investment in real power. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to chase the fleeting approval of the present, or will you master the art of building for the future? The power is there for those who understand. In the realm of lasting influence, the judgment of history always trumps the applause of the moment. For in the end, it is not those who are most like to prevail. It is not those who win the most daily battles who succeed. It is those who understand that in the game of power, true victory lies not in being remembered as good, but in becoming impossible to forget. Your role is not to please the audience of today, but to shape the world inherited by tomorrow. Let others chase applause while you quietly build empires that will outlast both the applause and those who give it. The fool seeks the spotlight. The amateur craves recognition. But the master? The master understands that ultimate power lies in invisibility, in being the unseen hand that moves the world. Let me teach you the final and most crucial lesson. True power belongs to those who orchestrate everything while appearing to control nothing. In my years studying power's true nature, I witnessed how the most effective wielders of influence were rarely known to the masses. They understood what you must now learn. Visibility is vulnerability, and the greatest power lies in being the architect that no one sees, but everyone serves. Understand this fundamental truth. Humans naturally resist visible control, but eagerly follow invisible guidance. Your task is not to be seen as powerful, but to exercise power so subtly that others believe they are following their own will while dancing to your design. The amateur thinks power must be displayed to be real. The master understands that true power is most effective when its existence is never suspected. It's not about hiding your strength, it's about making your influence so pervasive it becomes the natural order of things. Consider how the most effective power structures throughout history have operated. Not through obvious dominance, but through invisible systems of control that shaped behavior while appearing to merely facilitate it. They understood that the perfect exercise of power is one that never needs to prove itself. But here is where most fail. They cannot resist the ego's demand for recognition. This is the mark of an amateur. True mastery of shadow power requires the willingness to let others take credit for your orchestrations, to watch your designs unfold, while remaining invisible behind the scenes. Learn to move like water through the structures of power. Essential to everything, but noticed by none. Every major decision should bear your influence, but not your fingerprints. Every significant change should serve your interests, while appearing to serve others. The method is precise and requires perfect self-control. First, create networks of influence that operate automatically on your behalf. Then establish systems where your will becomes the path of least resistance. Finally, remove yourself so completely from the visible exercise of power that your influence becomes undetectable. Remember, people will resist obvious control but will embrace subtle guidance that feels like their own insight. Your role is not to be the visible leader, but the invisible current that shapes all choices while appearing to shape none. The tools of shadow mastery are subtle. Strategic absence that creates dependency, careful delegation that obscures true authority, perfect timing that makes orchestrated events appear natural. Master these tools, learn when to deploy them. Understand that invisibility, like any strategy, must be maintained with constant vigilance. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of shadow mastery is its ability to make your influence self-perpetuating. When your power is invisible, it cannot be directly challenged. When your control is subtle, it becomes part of the natural order that others maintain on your behalf. Study how the most enduring systems of power operate. They don't announce their control. They embed it in the very fabric of daily life. They understand that true power lies not in being the visible king, but in being the unseen force that kings unknowingly serve. You must become not just a wielder of power, but its ghost. Create situations where your will manifests through the natural actions of others, where your vision becomes reality through decisions that others believe are their own, where your power grows stronger precisely because its source remains hidden. The masses think power must be seen to be real. What they don't understand is that real power lies in being the hand that writes the rules while others focus on playing the game, in being the current beneath the surface while others watch the waves. Remember, in the game of power, it is better to be the unseen orchestrator than the visible ruler. Every degree of invisibility is a degree of invulnerability. Every layer of shadow is a layer of strength. The choice before you is simple. Will you continue to seek recognition for your power, or will you master the art of invisible influence? The control is there for those who understand. In the realm of true power, the deepest impact belongs to those who leave no trace of their passage. For in the end, it is not those who are most visible who prevail. It is not those who claim the most credit who succeed. It is those who understand that in the game of ultimate power, the true master is the one whose existence is felt but never seen, whose influence is everywhere but whose presence is nowhere. Your role is not to be the actor on the stage, but the playwright who writes the script and the unseen hand that moves all pieces. Let others bask in the spotlight while you quietly control the machinery that creates both light and shadow.